Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott.
And I'm your other host, Mark.
In each episode, Mark and I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching in the foundation and youth development phases. We will share our thoughts, ideas and experiences, and whenever possible include guests so we can get their insights and opinions too. Thanks for listening and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm delighted to say we have another brilliant guest with us today. Very topical given the current situation and what's maybe changed certainly in the UK over the last week or so. So we've got Aaron Tyler with us. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for saying yes and agreeing to come on it, particularly at pretty short notice.
Yep, no worries at all.
So Aaron, first of all, I've come across some of the stuff you've been doing because you've been kindly sharing some resources out through Twitter. Very topical given they've been around maybe managing this situation with doing training but meeting the COVID-19 requirements of social distancing, which we'll come and talk about in a minute if that's okay.
Yep, sure.
But first and foremost, how are you? How's it all been with the current situation?
I'm okay. Yeah, no, it's not been too bad if I'm honest. There are a couple of frustrating
you can't
times.
Say that.
Well,
you've got to pretend it's all disaster.
I mean, it was a bit weird for the first couple of weeks trying to get used to it, but then I think once I got into the routine and settled down a bit, and it was actually quite nice to stop for a minute and actually just see what's going on. I mean, it's great to spend some time with the family. Okay, occasionally everyone's like, I want to get out of these four walls. I've had enough for you type thing. But at the other time, I think everyone will look back at this period at some point and go, that was actually all right. Clearly, if you've had anyone close to you affected by COVID, it won't be. But if by and large, you, your friends and family and those that matter to you, you've just had to spend some time indoors and everything else okay, health and finances, etc. It hasn't been the end of the world that it could have been type thing. And I've had lots of time to reflect, lots of time to do some learning myself. And just really excited about getting back out there, really.
We've got no excuse for not being prepared for next season, have we?
I was chatting to someone else about that. That's the problem, isn't it? You get back out coaching and go, right, boys, I've got 12 weeks, or girls, whoever it is you coach, I've got 12 weeks of ideas.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them to you all at once.
Brilliant. Well, look, before we get into, I guess the main theme of the topic today is going to be looking around, what coaches can do now we hopefully back on the grass, but also managing those social distancing requirements. But before we get to that conversation, I wonder if you mind, Aaron, just giving us a bit of a background to your history and what you've been up to and what you were doing before lockdown.
Yep, sure. I'll try and keep it brief. I started coaching 18 years ago now, just before I left school. Started helping out with the first years at my school. I was playing at semi-pro club then and did for a little bit longer before actually slightly falling out of love with football. I played a lot as a kid and had got up to a level. I was never going to make it as a pro, and I sort of knew that. But I think just like lots of people at that age get different interests. I ended up going travelling for a bit, but I coached in New Zealand while I was travelling, which was a great experience, coaching with some really young primary school children there. Came back, I lived in Kent but moved to Bristol, and then did my level 2 in 2006. So it's back in the days where you didn't have to do a level 1 if you could show some playing experience. And I was coaching grassroots level coaching with a team that I played with, which is just an amateur level team at the time. And then the youth teams I started helping out with then. And it's quite a long journey, I guess, of becoming first team manager of a men's team and then actually applying for and getting a head coach role at Bristol University women's team before deciding to do my B licence. So I did my B licence a couple of years ago. So it was quite a bit of a gap between my level 2 and my B licence. And during that time, I guess I didn't really know whether I was a good coach or not. If you're on your own and you're coaching with yourself and maybe someone else is helping you and you might see your opposition coach every now and then, you've got nothing to judge yourself against. So you don't know if you're good, bad or indifferent. So when I really enjoyed the season that I had at Bristol Uni Women, would have carried on with them, but to do the B licence, I had to go with a team that played more competitive games. But that season, like I say, was excellent. And that's what gave me the motivation to go on my B licence. Really pleased I got accepted, and then thought, wow, I'm out of my comfort zone here. I've properly stepped into the higher levels of coaching. And first day, I remember seeing everyone in their badges. We had some Villa coaches and some West Brom coaches and Bristol City, etc. And I was like, oh, crikey. But as it went on, I held my own and did okay on the course. Prior to the end of the course, lead tutor and my direct tutor, as head of Bristol Rovers Academy at the time, sat me down and said, what are your plans with football, Aaron? We've been impressed with what you're doing. We know that obviously you're a grassroots coach at the moment, but there's potentially a career for you. And at that point, up and literally until they sat me down, I hadn't really realised whether there would be an option. I always loved football and always thought try and be involved in it, but never knew that it might be something I could do full time. They asked me to become an FA coach mentor, or to at least apply for it. I had to go through the process, obviously, but said that's a good way to start. And that's been a great experience. So I still work for the FA as a coach mentor. And then earlier this year, I finally took the decision to go full time. So I was a contract project manager, decided that I was going to run down my last contract and not find a new one. That finished at the end of February. So timing wasn't great to be quitting normal work and going into football with what's happened. But as I was saying, this time to actually reflect, I'm 100% confident I've made the right decision. So much happier, feels so much more. Well, it just doesn't feel like work, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That's where we are at the moment. I'm now involved with 4 clubs and RTCs that I'll be coaching at, and combine them all together, it's pretty much a full-time job. Okay. And certainly when we've got to be doing more sessions at the moment.
It's a good point you make about not knowing if you're a good coach or not. And I think that's the case for lots of coaches, isn't it? Because you're so focused on what you're doing with the players you work with that you don't often get a chance to see other coaches or even be observed. And also a lot of coaches like to be observed or have time to see other coaches. So it's a really good point about not knowing how good you are until you throw yourself in on a program of study, or you open yourself up to kind of being looked at through a mentorship program or something else. Absolutely.
I couldn't recommend getting a mentor more. I will be myself. I do have a couple of mentors that I speak to, but I'd like to get someone to spending more time at my sessions, which I'm working on at the moment. And when I went on my B, I very quickly started spending time at the academies, which was great. As I said, Johnny Henson was my direct tutor on my B licence. He was head of the academy at Bristol Rovers, and he let me go along and observe sessions. And actually, it was watching them that made me realise it's not a million miles different from what I'm doing with the grassroots clubs. Yeah, okay, the players are better, but the organisation is the same, and the way that you coach, you need to adapt to who you're working with. You need to have that technical knowledge, but it's still a relationship between one person and another person, or one person and a group of people. You need just all that human relationship, really. So yeah, I think as coaches, it's difficult because it's difficult to find the time. But if we could all get out and observe each other, support each other a bit more, then we'll know where we are and we can all make improvements, really.
And other sports as well, right? Not just looking at your own sport, but getting out and seeing how other sports are played and how they
really good
work.
Point. So. Definitely.
So, Aaron, you've obviously coached in a variety of age groups. You've coached men's and women's. Interested to know kind of what would you say is your kind of coaching philosophy? And I know that's a bit of an open phrase, but how would you describe the way you approach coaching, and what are your principles? And maybe might be useful, what would a typical Aaron session look like? If we came to one of your sessions, what might we expect to see as one of your players?
Sure. I mean, I'm quite, a deep thinker about football, tend to read quite a lot. And sometimes that can be a benefit to my sessions, and other times it's actually a hindrance. So I like to do lots of the why. If I've asked a player to go a particular move, or I'm talking to them and saying, what do you think about this? I can easily get into the why. And sometimes I have to be careful I don't give too much information. Common feedback from mentors and coaches that have worked with me is sometimes, Aaron, there's just a little bit too much for the level of player you're working with. And even at every level, players learn differently. I've been reading Pep Confidential recently, or listening to it on an audiobook actually, and he was saying that when he was at Munich, his 2 description of players were Frank Ribery and Philip Lahm. Ribery was very much, give me an instruction and I'll go do it, and then I'll come back and ask the next instruction. Do not give me 2, 3 or 4 or more instructions at once, because I'm just not interested. Philip Lahm and Pep Guardiola, by all accounts, would spend hours upon hours dissecting every single part of the game. And that's just the way that Lahm learned, and it's different to how Ribery learned. So I'm much more towards, I guess, the Lahm side of things, liking to know the detail. And so my sessions and the way I coach is I want to coach players to be decision makers. They've got to understand the principles of the game, the components of the game, and then come up with their own problem-solving ability. So lots of my sessions will be setting problems, like it will be small-sided games with specific ways to score a goal. It might be, I was chatting to a coach this morning about putting on a session and learning to run with a ball. Saying at a very basic level, you could do a 3v3. You just have a box, and at either end is a goal line, and you get a point by running with the ball through the line under control. Now, if you just set that up as a drill, players might do it. But are they thinking, why am I'm not scoring a goal? And at what point should I run, and how does this relate to my position during a game? And so then you need to bring in the extra level of detail going, right, if you're a fullback and now you're attacking the space in front of you because it's opened up, well, do we want you to do that in an 11v11 game? Absolutely. Why not? You're penetrating a line of defence and you're dragging a defender over to apply pressure to you. If that defender's coming towards you and you've already left one defender behind you, say you've gone past the front line and no winger's coming across to you, that winger must have left one of your teammates. So you've dragged him out of position, you can now pass him. And you can get all of that into a 3v3 game. And I think that's how I like to coach, is go, rather than just going, there's a drill, do it. And this is why we're doing it. This is how it relates to the real game, etc. And then we would go into a small-sided game, 7v7 or something, and still have those principles with goals, with keepers, and then see if the players can recognise the opportunity to run with the ball at the right time.
Would you work on a specific theme, Aaron, or would you just have more of a general structure to a session?
No, there's always a tactical element. There's a focus to every session that I do. And it might be that focus is the same for 3 or more weeks. I tend to work in possession for about 4 weeks, a week of transition from in to out, and out of possession for 4 weeks, and then transition again from out to in. Depends how many sessions you have a week with your team. Sometimes you might extend that to 6 weeks and 2 weeks, 6 weeks and 2 weeks, or you do 4 and 1. Depends really on, like I said, the team you're working with. And then I'll have through my tactical periodization, I'll have a theme for the block, for the in-possession block. It could just be penetration. It could be the attacking principle of penetration. And then the 4 weeks each week we'll look at a different way that we can penetrate the lines. So if we're playing out from the back, it's how do we use the build-up phase from playing out from the back to break that first line of penetration? Are we going to have a centre-back run with the ball? We're going to pass through to our number 4, to our holding midfielder, for example. And then the next week, it might be we'll look at the middle third, how we're going to progress for the middle third and build up play. We're going to go wide, we're going to go central. Are we going to have our fullbacks coming in to support that, like inverted fullbacks like Man City do, or they're going to get wide like Liverpool's fullbacks do? And so each session will have a theme. And then within that, you've got all of your technical skills. So like we've used already, the running with the ball, or it's passing with accuracy, passing movement, support play. Let's say I'm a centre back and I've passed to my fullback's gone off and running with the ball. That's great. What do I do now? Well, I need to shift across and provide cover in case it gets tackled. Yeah. So always thinking about all 4 phases of the game, the in, transition, out and transition back.
It sounds like you work from the game and kind of then move backwards from that. So you start with the game and then work backwards to what your session is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How do you manage then maybe some of the more technical details if you're dealing with, maybe the fine tuning stuff of ball manipulation skills? If a player's got a particular challenge around something that's technical based, how do you manage that when you have that approach?
So we usually have an arrival activity, which is technically based anyway. So particularly with the younger players, I mean, if you're playing with 8s, for example, there's less requirement for them to do a big warm-up. They don't need to be doing huge yoga-based lunges that your senior 30-year-old players might be like, give me a week and I'll have warmed up type thing. Yeah. So you can get straight into, right, guys, I want you all running with a ball. I want you just chaos management. I did rugby level 1 many years ago, and they just said rugby is the most chaotic game ever. So just make it a chaotic practice. And within football, it can be at that age. So let them just run with the ball, all different directions, lots of turns. And by doing that, they're getting all of the warm-ups anyways. If then within that, you've got particular players within your squad that just need an extra bit of advice, that's the moment to pull them to one side. So if you've got every player on the ball, then you can say, right, Johnny, whatever your name is, or Alice, or whatever it might be, you start using different sides of your foot. Can you use your left foot as well as your right foot? Show me 3 or 4 different turns that you can do. And then you get right down to the details saying, okay, if you're turning, where are you going to plant your standing foot? How are you going to turn? Are you going to look before you turn? Show me how you're going to look, etc. And I think if from your individual player analysis that I try and do periodically throughout the season, I know that throughout different times, there'll be 4 or 5 players that will need help on this technical aspect. There'll be a different 4 or 5 players on a different technical aspect the next week. And I think, right, during the warm-up, I'm going to get round and spend 2 minutes with each of these 4 players. 10-minute warm-up, that should work. Or ideally, you'd be working with another coach, and between you can balance out who's taking the big group and who's just going to do 1 or 2 to the side. Yeah. And again, you can do that during the small-sided games. If you pull someone to the side because you want to just do a bit more advice on their technical movement during that bigger game, then don't stop the game just for that one piece of advice. If everyone's making the same mistake, stop it and coach the whole group. But if it's just one player, take a minute, take 30 seconds with them to the side. You'll hear the players moan about, oh, we're a man down. It's like, we'll deal with it. Like, you might get someone sent off in a match, like adapt, like it's another opportunity to learn anyway. So,
Yeah.
I think that's the ways. Yeah, always you get very small amount of time with players generally, especially at grassroots. So keep the ball rolling as often as possible.
Well, on that point then, Aaron, what's your view on long-term development and really, I guess, how coaches embrace that? And I recognise maybe the academy system is slightly different to maybe us grassroots coaches and parents out there doing the best with the players they've got. But what is long-term to you, and do you put a value on long-term development?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's with youth players. I think it's the most important thing, balanced with being competitive at the right ages. So foundation level, if they're winning, losing each week, doesn't matter. It doesn't get recorded. Pretty much everyone's forgotten about it. Parents and coaches will remember the score for a lot longer than the kids will try and forget about it. I think once you're into certainly 11-a-side football, we're playing football to win games, and so there needs to be an element of teaching a team to win a game as part of their development. At the end of the day, if they're going to go anywhere into adult football, they will be asked to win games, and even like senior youth football, 18s, 21s, 23s, they're going to be expected to win. So there's still that part of it. But in my mind, I try and think about what's an end player look like, particularly if you're going to have a club philosophy. Let's say you are an academy or a development centre and you're trying to produce players for your first team or players that can be traded, then you need to know what that end product looks like and then come back. If you're a team that's going to produce players that are always on the ball, you're going to need your 8-year-olds to be very comfortable with the ball fairly early on in their development. If you're a team that's more devoted to less possession, but you want quick counterattacks, quick movement, players that can hold up the ball, then you might spend more time with your 8-year-olds on running with the ball, of running onto the ball into space, of receiving it from a longer pass. And I guess it depends what your individual coaching philosophy is and your club philosophy is as to where you go with that. But in terms of long-term development, I just see each season as a building block from those core basics: core control of the ball, manipulation of the ball, basic understanding of, if I haven't got the ball, can I get into the right position to receive it? Can I get in on the right angle? Can I look to play forwards? If I can't, can I go backwards? Those sorts of early decisions, and then you just add on to it each of the way through. I think it would help clubs, even grassroots clubs, if they have that way of playing, so that each coach could come in and know where their team should be. And then you don't, especially if you change coaches, the coach doesn't follow the age group. You don't want to come in and say, right, I know you've been playing 4-3-3, but now we're playing 4-5-1. And if anyone tries to pass it more than twice without lumping it to our striker, you're in trouble. It's just a completely new philosophy. So give the players a chance to develop over time, I think, and try and stick to one way of playing if you can.
That continuity is so key, isn't it? I mean, the formations is one thing, and I get that, but even just having that consistent kind of messages that gets built on. So what you might say to a group of under 7, under 8s is fantastic, but then if it gets lost to under 9s, under 10s because someone else comes in and gives different messages, that can be quite disconcerting for the players, especially young players, where if you've got that unified single message that kind of goes through you, if that baton gets passed on, the message may change slightly, but at least it's building on the previous messages, then that can only be beneficial for the players, right? And I think it's a good point, because again, in grassroots world, a lot of teams operate in isolation inside, don't they? And kind of what they do is just their thing, good, bad, or indifferent. It is what it is. But the minute then that player either leaves that environment or another coach comes in, it's almost like starting again for many of these players.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that a common language is really important. So coaches at all levels will use the phrase pressing. Okay, but what does pressing look like? Well, surely we're applying pressure all the time. Otherwise, we're just Marco Bielsa telling Leeds to get out of the way because they've got to get a goal back because we shouldn't have scored it. So it's just where we're applying pressure. And does pressure mean you have to be 100 miles an hour trying to win the ball back there and then? Or actually, we're applying pressure by going, go on, have the ball, see if you can beat us, try and break us down. We're setting our 2 lines of 3 lines of defence, whatever it might be. That's applying pressure in a different way. So I think if you're able to even get like a mini glossary, and you might have 5 terms for your under 8s, and you might have 40 terms for your under 18s. And each year you go, right, we've done those 5. This is what it means now, guys. This is what it means later. This is what it means then. And then even just, like you said, the coaches can all talk to each other on the same level, ask for advice, and know what each other means when they're going to say it, or when they're saying these different terms. I think it helps me. It definitely helps me anyway. And I think that lots of people will benefit from it.
Thanks, Aaron. That's excellent. If it's okay, we're going to crack on to what I guess is the main part of the conversation today, and that's really looking at getting ourselves back out on the grass, and in certainly different circumstances, what we can do with our players that can also mirror in with the social distancing requirements that are still in place, particularly in the UK. So for those listening, the current situation here is that I think in our club, it's next weekend we're going to start. We're allowed to go out and train with the players again in groups of 5 plus a coach and do practices, but we've got to maintain social distancing of 2 meters. So a bit like you, Aaron, we've had a very kind of game-based philosophy to our coaching practices for the last 6-7 years. And these players are used to coming in and competing hard and playing 2v2s, 3v3s, 5v5s, lots of directional scoring game stuff, lots of contact. It's a bit scary, obviously, to kind of think about how I'm going to approach this now, to try and maintain that kind of level of engagement and fun and competitiveness, but also keep everyone safe and well. So no pressure, Aaron, but over to you. Help us out here.
Well, exactly. And that I sat down on Tuesday after the announcement on Monday, literally with a blank piece of paper, and thought, okay, well, what do we do? And I came up with loads of sort of drills. Like, I mean, when I was playing football in the 80s and 90s, it was all drill based anyway. So I've got thousands of them. You can go in and out of cones, you can pass to each other. And I still think they've got their place at the right time, not necessarily going out of cones, but lots of passing drills, etc. And there's lots of basic fitness, endurance stuff you can do whilst moving the ball as well. And then I was thinking, well, how can I make it look a little bit like a game? I guess the key thing that I came up with, the sessions that I shared on Twitter earlier, and the ones I'm going to share for next week, is trying to put an element of opposition in there. If you're fortunate enough as a club to have mannequins, then they're ideal. If you don't, phase down from that is a couple of poles put 2 feet apart and stick them in the ground. And then again, that's a bit of an obstacle. And at the very least, potentially cones or gates, etc., as opposition. And then it's just trying to create either patterns of play. So let's say you want to play out from the back and you want to get to halfway. What's that going to look like? What's the movement going to look like? Still encourage your player to pretend they've got a marker to go lose their marker, so they go one direction and come back to receive. What's the trigger they're giving to their teammate about when they're going to go which way to receive it? Is it a look on, or even a wink, or like a hand up sort of like gesture? I mean, I remember listening to an interview of Paul Scholes saying he never had to look for a trigger of gigs. He just knew that it'd be running into the channel as soon as he got the ball, so he played it blind. I mean, that'd be great if you can get to that, but whilst you're looking at each other, knowing when to pass, which foot do you want him to pass to? Is he left foot? Is he right footed? Is it a case of you're just going to play to the back foot? And getting those relationships between players, it's actually, you can turn it around as an opportunity, because we're so used to normally playing games. We're so used to having that intensity, the contact, the directional stuff, which is all, I think, is brilliant. It's actually a nice excuse to be able to break it right down to the fundamentals of going, you're going to pass to me, I'm going to receive it from you. This is how I like to receive it. I mean, I played as a forward, so I would spend times with my wingers going, I'm going to go to the back post, but actually I want to receive it front post, because I'm going to run across the centre back and try and come on his blind side. Can you deliver it in there with pace? And I'll try and get anything on it, type thing. And sometimes if I went to a new team, a winger would be like, oh, I've never had a forward tell me how they liked it crossed. I just looked at where he was and tried to hit it. But then you go, well, actually, no, occasionally I'm going to come front post, because I've done that for the last 3 times. I've gone to the back and then come front. Now the centre back thinks I'm always going to go there. Let's reverse it. Let's go the other way. And the signal's going to be, I'm going to put my hand on top of my head or whatever it is before you cross it, type thing. And it's just, I think if you just approach your sessions with that type of positive attitude of looking at it as an opportunity to develop these more intricate details and pieces of information with your players, and then you should be able to get something out of it. Although, I mean, as we spoke off recording right at the start, I think you might want to reduce the sessions. You might want to make them shorter, because you're going to lose that intensity if you do them for too long. And you've also potentially got players that haven't done a huge amount of movement for the last 10 weeks. So let's not rush back and try and do an hour and a half session straight away. If we get a good quality 30 minutes, 40 minutes on the pitch where you can get that information across, and most importantly, the players enjoy it and want to come back, then I think that's a win, really.
It's a good point, Aaron, about the timings, because I guess we're still hoping that come September the season gets back to some normality, although that's not necessarily likely. for us, we'll be looking to play games in October again, which is a big question mark over games. So we could be doing this kind of practice in this kind of environment for months to come in theory. And that's a strong possibility. It won't all suddenly disappear come September. So would you recommend that as coaches that we think about that longer term again with our planning? Because if you're going to run some effective practices now that you can't change much in the next maybe 3, 4, 5, possibly 6 months, then easing players back into this is no bad thing, and pacing yourself a little bit because of the fact we might have longer. Well, hopefully we're back sooner rather than later, but in proper contact. But that might not be the case, and therefore it makes sense to maybe take it a bit easier, at least easing back into this process.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully it will be. I think what I'm hoping, and I've got nothing really to base this on other than hope, and what I've seen is, I mean, 2 weeks ago we were allowed to meet one other person from outside our household. Then we're allowed to meet 6. We were allowed to do 1v1 training with adults. Now we're allowed to do 1 to 5 training with children as long as there's a parent present. We're potentially not more than 2 or 3 weeks away from being able to do a coach with 10, as long as you keep your social distance. And if you think in those logical steps, you go, right, I might work with a unit of 5, it might be my defenders and my goalkeeper, and we'll do some stuff positionally, and you start working that. And then you've got your second group might be your midfielders and your attackers. You think in 3 weeks' time, I might be able to bring them together. So how am I going to move that together? And you just start like adding it on layer by layer, and not rushing it too much. And there should be enough content for us to get out there and still keep the players engaged. Hopefully lots of coaches will start sharing their ideas as well, because it is new to all of us. I love seeing other people's ideas, and hence why I share a lot of mine as well. And so if we can get some stuff out there between us as a group of coaches on Twitter and elsewhere, then there should be enough information going around. And it's just going to be a little bit of trial and error. Yeah. We've got to see what engages the players most of all. They might love the fact that they can come in and spend some time doing their turns and their keepy-ups or shooting practice, etc. Or they might hate it. We just don't know. So it's a little bit of trial and error. Everyone should be nice and easy on themselves, and just no pressure, really, I don't think.
Yeah, find their feet.
Exactly.
It's just really good stuff in there, Aaron. So my first question would be then, and I know it will depend on what age group you've got and how many players you've got, that kind of stuff, but how would you run a session? Or would you run a session in small groups then, like one group at a time? Or would you look to have groups kind of in bubbles at the same session doing different things, where you'd almost float between as the coach?
Yeah, so that's it's an interesting question, because having read, this is me speaking myself at the moment, so I'm an FA mentor, but these are all my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Having read the FA's guidance on Monday, I understood the bit about 1 coach and 5 players. I thought, yep, I understand that. That's your bubble, basically. On the page that they produced, on the next column, it said you potentially could have a coach with 2 bubbles. And then I've spoken to other coaches since, and we're like, does that mean I can have 3 groups of 5, which is pretty much a squad size, and me, and I'm okay? Or does it mean I need to have a coach per group of 5, but we can have 3 bubbles and 3 coaches together? And I must admit, I'm not 100% sure. Okay. And I've asked my line managers and others, and I know others have asked people in our local FA, and they're asking up as well.
Yep.
So I'm waiting to get the final sort of clarity on that. And I believe that the FA are going to release something very shortly to try and clarify that position. If that is possible, though, then that opens up all sorts of things. Yes, you could do stations. You can have a group of 5 doing one thing, group of 5 doing something else, another group of 5 doing something. You rotate them through. And I think that would be great. That's a big step up from just having one group at a time.
Yeah.
And you can do all sorts of different things then.
Yeah, and I appreciate your honesty there. And you're not here on the episode representing the FA. It's definitely your opinion, so we understand that. And I'm sure, like everyone, we're just trying to find out what the best thing is to do things the best we can, the safest way possible. Yeah. And the FA are doing that. And it would be great again, but you got to think, well, if you are going to do stations, then you got to make sure the equipment's clean in between the transition of the groups and stuff. So there's things to keep thinking about. But It is about being creative again as coaches, and I guess for some of us it's about new challenges, because if you're quite a good coach in the sense you're doing lots of ball skill stuff, particularly unopposed ball skill things, in individual training, and I've seen some really great coaches, some really good stuff around that. I'm not one of those coaches, unfortunately. I've got more work to do to get myself up to speed, so I'd have to work on these things. You said something really good in the ideas, and it was around triggers, which I hadn't thought about that at all, but what a wonderful opportunity, you're right, to maybe use, like you say, mannequins or obstacles as fixed positions, which are never ideal, but represent a defender or an attacker, depending on what you're using it for. But then actually really fine tuning some of that patterns of play stuff or the way the players can link together by looking at triggers. You gave some examples there then, but Aaron, would you mind just expanding a bit on that and saying how maybe you use triggers or what kind of triggers coaches could use? Because for some of us, that might be quite a new concept, especially working with younger players where, that there's other things that prioritize before you start looking at triggers. What are they and how would you use them? And how could you think we could use them?
Yeah, certainly I've used triggers before. So some of the drills that are unopposed, done that quite a few times. A trigger is any sort of signal, any sort of moment in a game or situation that occurs that means something else is about to happen. So it could be as simple as goalkeeper goes to take a goal kick, centre backs come down and they go just before you could go into the box, or they go down to receive. The other team goes, we're not going to let you play out from there. We're going to press really high. And they come and man mark you. So you're thinking, I don't really want to now play to my centre-back who's completely man marked. It's less of an issue now because they can step inside the box and give themselves 5 yards of space. But a season ago, you couldn't do that. Teams that I was coaching in, we used to have a signal that the keeper would go and literally sort of shoo away as centre-backs, go, no, we're going to go long. Yeah, because they're marked. So centre-backs will run up. As soon as that happens, the full-backs, which we've already got wide up, just sprint back into the spaces that the centre-backs have left. The other team are caught a little bit flat-footed, hopefully, and the keeper still plays it short. And we're in the same situation, and we're playing out from the back. And the trigger is the signal that your team understand that the other team don't expect. And this becomes more and more required against better and better teams who are better at marking you. And so the faster you move, the better you are at losing your markers, at creating space. So I did a YouTube video the other day on Liverpool talking about how effective Alexander-Arnold and Robertson were in their roles within the team. But it was only because of the movement of Wijnaldum and Henderson and other players that they were able to get as far forward as they do. There was a moment when Mane came short to look like he was going to receive a pass, and the fullback came really tight to him. I think it was Van Dijk on the ball, and Van Dijk just chipped it straight over his head into the space he'd left because Robertson was flying down the wing to get into that space. The winger who should have been marking Robertson was like, what's going on here? Where is he? I've lost him. Then suddenly centre-back came flying out from the middle to try and apply pressure to Robertson. That left, I think it was Salah coming in from the other side, completely free in the middle, cross goal. And it was just because of that movement. Now, it was Robertson looking at Mane, who was looking at Van Dijk, and between the three of them, they knew that as soon as Mane dropped deep, that Robertson had to go, and the pass was going to go in there. That doesn't happen by chance. That is practiced over and over and over again. And the trigger might be as simple, like I say, as Mane just holding up his hand in front of his face, just touching his nose or something like that. It could be anything as simple as that. He'll come running in, touch his nose, look directly at Van Dijk, and Robertson's gone because he's seen that. Rugby players use it all the time with codes and signals. They do calls with their lineouts. Basketball players have got loads of calls for their moves. You hear, NFL has got to be the king of set piece, like triggers and moves and calling of plays, etc. Football, soccer is a much more fluid game because there's less stopping and starting than some of those sports. But if we can bring in any of that type of signalling to each other and understanding what each other's going to do, then there's all sorts of opportunities you can create. Throw-ins isn't one I love. I think every throw-in is such an easy set piece. I've done one where you've got a throw-in maybe on near the halfway line, get a midfielder and a centre-back to come and stand right next to each other. They'll be marked, and they just run in either direction, and you throw it to the player that stood behind them. And it's just little things like that.
It's funny, and we've our little under-8s team currently, we've had a throw-in routine for 2 years, little throw-in routine. Now, don't get me wrong, it's our primary routine, so the players know to use it, but they can still think for themselves. So there's a different opportunity that's on, then think in the moment. However, you've got to go to one to use that they want to. And we've used it for 2 seasons and played lots of teams a number of times, and it never fails. It never fails. It always works for us. And it's a clever little move, but it's quite simple. But the boys understand the concepts of having this kind of cue and this movement that then enables us to, because often throw-ins at the younger age groups are more of an advantage to the opposition who haven't got the ball, because you end up throwing it in a play that everyone knows and jumps it and they're attacking the goal. So it does work. And I think these triggers, it's cues for combinations of movement, isn't it? Rather than necessarily patterns of play. It's not a playbook. So done the right way, you would hope that it's not overcoaching and too prescriptive. And you could do it for younger age groups, because actually a little code and a little secret is quite a fun thing to do. And if you've got groups working on how can we do a little code for a movement where Are you going to attack the front post or the back post and across, or are you going to cross it high or low? And they can work in little groups and put things together. They can watch each other's and see which ones they like the most, then choosing their team when we go back to playing football again. It's a great way to introduce that concept of triggers and ideas without being the coach that overcoaches.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. You're the coach that introduces the idea of triggers and gives an example or two, and then you hand it over to the players at almost any age, like you've said, even the younger ones at 8s or 9s, and go, right, can you come up with your own? Now, suddenly we've got a training drill where you've got players having to make decisions, so that you're getting into the psychological corner. You've then got them thinking a bit of tactically about space, just at the very basic levels, but really importantly, you're maximizing the social corner. You're going to see a leader emerge. You're going to see maybe a couple of leaders emerge. They might even have a little bit of a row, but they'll work it out amongst themselves. There's okay, when we disagree, how are we then going to agree? Because we're teammates at the end of the day. And just that bonding and that player ownership. I mean, I love doing that type of thing because that's the type of teams I'd like. I like players that own the decision, become decision makers, and they lead the sessions.
Like you said at the beginning, the games are chaotic, and actually, no moment is really the same. So having the ability to think in the moment is critical to being a successful player, really, in a successful team. And the more chance you get the players to practice that in training, then the more chance you've got of seeing it in games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
What about theory then, Aaron? Is it a time now, given the fact that hopefully over here the weather's it's been cracking. It's a bit not quite so nice today, but the weather's been lovely. Assuming that it's a bit warmer out there anyway over the next few months, is there a place for theory right now? And I guess by that I mean not necessarily saying taking textbook and pens and paper, but could coaches spend times with their teams in small groups and looking at some more of the theory side of it? So again, looking at and not telling the players what to do necessarily by theory, but actually get them to think about, okay, what would a goalkeeper do in these situations by using maybe a tactics board or something like that, or just certain things like that. Is that something that we could use during times where we can't have contact?
No, I couldn't. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, I've done a couple of Zoom sessions with on the 13 side, and we've looked at some tactical stuff, and we've also actually done some psychological stuff. So I started working with this team relatively late this season, so I didn't know the players necessarily. I was new to them, so I asked them all to select their own fantasy Premier League team, 3 players, etc. But importantly, I wanted them to tell me why they were selecting each player, just to give me a bit of an insight as to their own thinking, their own characteristics, what they like about football, etc. And they pretty much all of them hand wrote it, so that gives you a little bit of an insight into who they are as well. Do they just put a couple of quick bullet points, or do they put loads and loads of words? And the information that came back was obviously the obvious: great finisher, great tackler, really good at heading, etc., really fast. It was the other stuff where they were going, he's a leader, he's a great role model, he always works hard, he's always supporting his teammates. Someone put down James Milner and was like, and he's only 13, mind you, the player that's chosen him, but going, oh yeah, James Milner's brilliant because he can play multiple positions and he always does his best for the team. He's always, whatever's asked of him, he does. So I picked out those types of things, and we did a Zoom call, and I put them in a little PowerPoint. Just went, look guys, these are your words, not mine. I haven't added anything to this. And I think they were all surprised to see how alike they were of each other. Kids, they sometimes feel a bit of peer pressure, sometimes feel a bit self-conscious that they wouldn't want to say things like that. And suddenly seeing everyone else's together, and we ended up producing 10 key values off the back of that, of how we wanted the team to be. We discussed what hard work looked like. Someone said, well, is it running lots? You're like, well, and then another boy said, well, what about the keeper? He can't run lots. Is he working hard? And we discussed that he'd always be communicating, etc. Hard work might just be turning up on time for training, making sure you've got your kit. And it was brilliant. And I think that can be really valuable as well, without obviously any risk to anyone's safety. And you can do that at any time.
What a great activity.
I really enjoyed it.
Oh, superb. Because not only there are you it's that life skill stuff, isn't it? You're not only working on something that's relevant to actual football and playing the game, but also it's about confidence in sharing your ideas, in kind of building those intangible stuff within making them, or putting a light on those intangibles that actually underpin success, maybe in all different ways in life, not just in your sports. Because being resilient, good communicator, understanding about teamwork, being able to be empathetic, all these things, are fundamental life skills that can transfer into all different worlds as these players move into different situations.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And just even the technological side, they're now using devices to do these types of meetings as we are now. Yeah. When they go into the workplace, they're going to be doing probably at least half of their working life could be like that. So there's all sorts that we can do.
On the spot now then, Aaron, and this is really just a question for me, because I like a bit of shooting and goalkeeping. All our players take it in terms of going in goal. And the one thing, I was thinking last night in bed, thinking, what am I going to do next Saturday for my sessions? So I could do lots of shooting and goalkeeping practice, because that's probably something I'm quite comfortable with. Any thoughts around that, and any ideas around how we might go about that as coaches, putting on some engaging social distancing goalkeeping practice sessions, so the boys taking turns of playing in goal and the boys taking turns of doing different kinds of shooting? And I appreciate it's pretty right on the spot now, so if you haven't got anything, don't worry, but if you've got some ideas, please let me know.
I think that it's again, using the type of obstacles, because forwards, the problem with shooting drills generally is we roll the ball across to them. They've got a 5 or more yard run up. They've got loads of time and space to focus on the ball, choose the right shot, hit it perfect technique, and put it in the top corner if they can, obviously. In reality, at all levels of football, most goals are scored within split-second shots, first-time shots, maybe one touch hit it, toe pokes. The number of Gary Lineker wouldn't have been a footballer if he weren't allowed to toe poke the ball, but he's second highest scorer for England, or third now. So I think that we need to create situations which try and recreate that. So ideally, when I'm doing shooting and finishing goalkeeper work, bring the 2 full-size goals, if you're 11-a-side, or 2 9v9 goals, within 20 yards of each other and play like 2v2. And you just like shoot lots of shots. Or play Wembley, which kids love doing, whether it's 2v2, and they're trying to get lots of shots away.
Which you could do, Aaron, couldn't you? You could do that practice even with social distancing, couldn't you? Because you could almost section up a little bit, so the keepers at least 2 meters from their supporting player, if you like, who's at least 2 meters away from the other attacking player and from the other goalkeeper. So you could do that, couldn't you? Almost like a 2v2 game there, but everyone's in their little zone, so they're perfectly safe.
Exactly. And then yes, you could do that. And then you've got also with if you did have mannequins or poles in the way, it's about that timing of a player coming from the blind side of a defender to receive it of one touch and then hitting it straight away. And then you're also coaching the player that's passing it instantly. They've got to make sure that pass is perfectly accurate at the right weight, right timing for their teammate to have the best chance of scoring. And I think that there's lots of different things we can do with that really as well. You can even play 1-2s where you come in and play it around the back of a mannequin or 2 poles, etc., for the first person that passed it to run on and then shoot. I think as much as we can recreate the pressure that anyone trying to shoot is under generally, you get your shot away quickly, any shot on target's better than no shot, etc., then I think you'll be getting a lot of value from the session. And keepers, again, don't get lots of time to set themselves, so if they can react and bounce to rebounds, etc., then I think realistic. Get a lot of it. Yeah, that's the challenge.
Is there anything that you're specifically concerned about going back training with the new requirements in place that's giving you kind of extra stress or worry, or is it just a case of that I just need to plan my session at a corner meeting these criteria and I should be fine?
Yeah, there is actually, and I strongly believe that every individual and their parents should make the right decision for them about whether they go back. I don't know if little Bobby's granddad, well, my father-in-law, for example, is type 1 diabetic, so we haven't seen him, but let's say that he happened to share a house with us and he lived in an annex. And my son goes to see him now that he's allowed to, or even if it's within that 2 meters, I might then feel concerned that by putting my son back into training, we're increasing the risk. And who knows anyone else's personal situation. So everyone should make their own situation. My concern is that 80% of players come back and then 20% don't. Is how are those 20% of players going to feel? Are they going to feel excluded? Are they going to feel left out? Are they going to be in a situation after we've done 10 weeks of socially distanced training where they're that bit behind? So I'm thinking, what can I do to also help those that don't come and respect and honour their right to make, and their parents' right to make that decision about whether they should train or not? I don't have any suggestions or answers for that at the moment, I'm afraid.
No, but just highlighting it is a great point, because you're right. First of all, everyone should feel no pressure to make that decision right now, 100%. And everyone's circumstances is different. And I think most people recognise that. But it's a real good point you make in the sense that even as a coach, well, you might be fine in saying, look, I accept that. But if 2 of your players don't come back or more, you may at best just almost forget about them, not resent them not being there, but just forget about them. And that's quite bad in itself, isn't it? You've got to find a way to support them too. And it's a great point, Aaron. And I'm sure just by flagging it up will get us all thinking a bit more about each player individually and how we support them regardless of whether they come to training or not.
I think so. There's other things like dealing with injuries, etc., which I think everyone can work through, whether you have PPE equipment or you have parents staying relatively close, that they have to have physical contact. They're the ones that do it. I think all of those things can get worked through. But I would be, as a coach, if I have some, I don't know who exactly is going to come back yet, but if I have some that say it's not right for us right now, I can completely respect that and then try and work really hard to keep them engaged one way or another. Just not sure how yet.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Aaron. We ask most of our guests this question towards the end, if you don't mind. So it's really an open box here, but if you were king for the day, is there anything you would want to change about coaching? We often target around grassroots coaching, but it doesn't really matter. So anything generally, really, if you can have a rule or put something in place that you think would improve or change grassroots coaching, is there anything you would do?
Well, one of my pet hates is I still see some coaches venture on the pitch, which drives me. Which drives me absolutely insane.
I think it's compulsory in our league, Aaron. You're not allowed to be off the pitch in our league.
I mean,
I don't do it, I promise, because I totally agree. It's like going to a kid's classroom, isn't it? And just standing in the middle of the classroom and telling them what to do. We would never do as parents, would we? But for some reason on the grass, we have to be a bit closer, don't we? But yeah, sorry, go on. This is your one, not mine. Yeah,
that's all right. So that's already a rule, though, so I don't need to change that. Just got to get people to follow it.
To enforce it, yeah.
I think it's not really a rule though, a change, but I would make us have like a coach cam on us for a game or two. I'd love it if someone just stood there with a camera and filmed you, okay, and then you watched it back on your own or with someone else and went, "Oh, blimey, I didn't know I did that," or "I wish I shut up then," or it's so tempting because you can see so much. You've got whatever age you are, you've got decades more experience of watching and playing and being involved in football than the kids you're coaching. So you're going to see more. You're going to see a lot more. And when they're right in the game, you can't see it anyway. I mean, we all tell the professionals what to do, let alone it's like 5-year-olds. But we do. And I've been guilty of it as well. So yeah, I'm not some saint who does it perfectly. But just if we had some sort of like electric shock once we started speaking too much, so and it just told you to shut up for a minute and let them play.
I love the idea. I mean, what if there was an agreement where you said, okay, look, one opposition parent is allowed to always film the opposition coach from both teams all the time?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't it just check your behaviour?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it just be like a little reminder to say, and we all need it sometimes, don't we? Just to remember this is about the players and not about us. And actually, it's not the Premier League and everything else. But I think we could use maybe videoing and filming constructively to help us all behave sensibly all the time.
Something like that would really help.
I like that one. That's a great one, Aaron. Yeah. That's one of the best ones you've had. So brilliant. Thanks, mate. Well, I know you're pushed for time. I don't want to make you late for your next thing you've got, but if you've got 2 minutes, just quickly, really, what are your plans now moving forward? And also, how can people reach you, Aaron? Because you share some great resources on Twitter, some really good stuff out there. And I think coaches need to see that if they've not done already. So yeah, how can they find you and what's your plans moving forward?
Well, quite simply, they can find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. With Pro7 Soccer. Although the Twitter handle is at 7pro_soccer, I believe. But I think if you search for Pro7 Soccer, you'll find me. My email address is just aaron@aarontyler.co.uk if anyone wants to drop me an email. And then my plans for the next 6 months. I mean, as I said to you, I decided to move into football full time shortly before lockdown. So my aim is to pick up roles that create a full-time position if they can, either whether it's 3 or 4 or I end up in one role that takes me full-time. I am very keen to do my A license at some point, but I'm also aware that the A license is just the qualification, it's the experience that I need as well. So I'm keen to get as much of that and work with as many different organisations as possible. I'll go and observe as many coaches as possible. I'm very lucky I get to do that in my mentoring role. I get to see other coaches, and it's brilliant to sit back and actually watch coaching sessions. So I'm going to try and do lots of that. I mean, 6 years looking further down the line, I have no idea. I hope that I'll be looking back to this sort of period going, that was the start. I'm now fully embedded in work, in coaching, and it doesn't feel like I work anymore, which is what my old job used to feel like a job. So now it's just my day, just my life. That's what happens.
I've got a feeling you're going to make that work, Aaron.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time today. You've been awesome. It's timely, in the sense of what's going on. You clearly, you know your stuff. You're passionate. You've shared some great resources, some great ideas, and it's just getting us coaches out there now thinking about working in a new way, or the new normal, if you like. But look, best of luck with all your plans with the full-time football stuff. I'm sure people are going to be snapping you up, mate. I've got no doubt about that. And the FA mentor things. We've got some FA mentors that we use around here, and they're all fantastic. So
yeah, there's some good people involved in that.
Exactly, the FA doing a great job on that basis, and people around. You're in Bristol, aren't you? So
yeah.
But yeah, Bristol lucky to have you where you are. So I'm sure they're getting well supported with your involvement. I don't know, Aaron, if there's any chance in the future, but I would love to discuss with you, if not a chance today, maybe your B license experience and how that went and what you learned out of it and what you got out of it and what you learned and things.
Yeah.
So if you're happy to come back on at some point in the not too distant future, we'll do that if that's okay.
Absolutely, no problem at all. And I'd be more than happy to talk about that.
You're a star.
That'd be great.
All right. Aaron, thank you so much. Best of luck and we'll speak soon.
Speak soon. Cheers. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.